By the end of this video, you're going to understand the circle of fifths. That's a promise. But before we get there, know this. Most all of music theory is based on this one very simple pattern. Skip, skip, don't skip, 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 don't. This is the underlying pattern of a major scale. If we start on C, skip a note, don't skip a note, skip a note, skip a note, skip a note, and don't skip a note, we've just played the C major scale. And if we start on A, skip a note, don't skip a note, skip a note, skip a note, don't skip a note, skip a note, and skip a note, we played the A minor scale. You might have noticed this is actually the same pattern, just with a different starting point in the sequence. So some genius was like, hey, we can group all of the potential patterns by starting note and call them keys. That will make it easier to play music. And then they decided to call this new system tonality. But here's the problem. Without some kind of diagram to help us remember which notes are in which keys, this whole tonality thing is kind of a pain in the ass. But then they found the pattern within the pattern. It turns out that the fifth note of any given major scale is significant because all of the notes in the fifth note's major scale will line up with the first note's major scale except one. For example, C major has no sharps or flats in its scale. The fifth note in C is G. G major has one sharp in its scale, F. The fifth note of G is D. D major has two sharps in its scale, F and C. See where I'm going with this? So they wrote this all out and they were like, whoa, as we progress through each fifth note scale, there's a universal order to which notes are sharp and flat. Let's call this the order of sharps and flats. So then, in the peak era of graphic design, the 1600s, they laid this all out on a clock-like diagram for everyone to use until the sun eventually burns out. It may not be obvious when looking at this masterpiece, but knowing what we know, we can actually decipher it now. The key thing to know is that as we progress clockwise from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock, we are adding sharps. In which order do we add sharps? Oh, well, the order of sharps, of course. But I know what you're thinking. Pierce, I already forgot the order of sharps. Actually, you didn't though. It's right in front of you. All you have to do is read clockwise from the 11 o'clock position, the F. For example, A major is at 3 o'clock, so it has 3 sharps. So what we do is move 3 hours from F, and now we know that A major has 3 sharps, F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp. Meaning that when we play an A major scale, or are playing in the key of A major, every time we reach F, C, or G, we need to play it sharp. So following this logic, when we are playing in the key of E major, we will count 4 hours from F, and know that in this key, F, C, G, and D are all sharp. Now I'm starting to feel like we're getting this. But unfortunately, this pattern only applies to the first half of our clock. Once we reach 7 o'clock, we need to move to the order of flats. And instead of counting up, now we're going to count down. I know this seems confusing, but trust me, doing this actually makes it easier. So D flat major at 7 o'clock actually has 5 flats. But how do we know which notes are flat? The order of flats, of course. And again, I know what you're thinking. Pierce, I already forgot the order of flats. And again, I'll say that, no you didn't. It's right in front of you. All you have to do is count backwards counterclockwise from 5 o'clock, B. So, counting 5 hours before B, we know that the flat notes in D flat major are B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat, and G flat. This whole business with flat notes and sharp notes is confusing, I know. The thing to remember here is that in all practicality, making a note flat is just dropping it 1 half step lower. A half step is just 1 piano key, 1 fret on a guitar, or 1 row lower on a piano roll. That's it. Conversely, making a note sharp is just making the note 1 half step higher. So look, now we know that the circle of fifths is a vague but useful chart that merely visualizes how a very simple fundamental pattern propagates across a larger pattern. What we don't know is why the hell there are these other letters under the letters representing major scales. Well, those are called relative minors. Remember earlier when I said that the minor scale is the same pattern but starting from a different point in the sequence? Well, guess what? That's now relevant when we're talking about relative minors. The secret that I've been withholding is that the 6th note in a major scale is also significant. If you were to play a minor scale starting at the 6th note of a major scale, all of the same notes will align. For example, the relative minor of C major is A minor, because it is the 6th note in the C major scale. Just like C major, the key of A minor features no sharp or flat notes. This note matching rule is true for all of the relative minors around the inside of the clock. They always feature the same notes as their major counterparts. Let's recap what we've learned. Notes are related by a principle called tonality. This manifests in the form of a very simple pattern between notes. To play a major scale, we pick a starting note, skip a note, skip another note, don't skip a note, skip a note, skip a note, skip a note, and then don't skip a note. To play a minor scale, we pick a starting point, skip a note, don't skip a note, skip a note, skip a note, don't skip a note, skip a note, and then skip another note. The circle of fifths visualizes how that underlying pattern affects the makeup of every musical key. It does this by laying out which notes land on sharps or flats from any given starting point. The circle progresses clockwise by taking the fifth note in one scale and making it the first note in the next scale. It's helpful to progress around the clock using fifths because each consecutive scale only features one note that's different from the scale that came before it. And that's how the circle of fifths works. Thanks for watching.